What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Some of you may know already, but I've been recently asked to help with a prospect show over on Dynasty Nerds, and maybe you didn't know that already, but what that means is I've been kind of scratching the surface on this 2026 draft class, looking at some of these prospects, trying to dig into the tape, see some of the traits that I like from some of these draft eligible players going into 2026 NFL draft season to hopefully give you guys an idea of who we might like and who we might not like for those Dynasty rookie drafts. Today I have 10 players that I want to talk about. Kind of just watched the tape, looked at these players, saw some things that I liked, feel like these players might be first round picks for us once we get to those rookie drafts in that, April time of the year, whenever that is that you guys do your drafts. But that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. Not really sure how this is going to go. I'm going to kind of work through it with you guys, so hopefully you guys are along for the ride. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these draft prospects. All right, so like I said, this is draft eligible prospects, so that doesn't mean that all of these players are going to enter the 2026 NFL draft. Obviously, some of these guys are probably going to go back to school. I think one guy particularly is most likely going to go back to school, but we will talk about all of them nonetheless because they are eligible for that draft class. But let's start it off at the quarterback position with Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. This is a guy who is a pocket passer, like I said, eligible for the 2026 NFL draft, and I think some of the things that he does really well on tape is he has an NFL type of arm. He has some easy velocity with his throws. He hits deep shots without effort. I think this is a player who plays with a lot of touch and anticipation. I think he can drop it over defenders in coverage to his wide receivers and give you guys some big, real NFL throws. It's impressive to me how calm he is under pressure. A lot of the times when he's getting pressured by that defensive line, he's able to just stand in the pocket, make throws, even find those passing lanes when the pocket is collapsing on top of him. I think he's mobile enough as well that he can throw when he's on the run. He also is a tough competitor, and I think a lot of the teammates that he has there at LSU, we've seen it happen at different times, but they buy into the leadership that Garrett Nussmeier has, which is obviously a big quality that you have to be a franchise quarterback at the NFL level. Now, I do think that this is a player who probably needs to put on a little bit of weight. He has a little bit of a skinny frame at about 200 pounds right now. He does take a beating, and I think durability is going to be a concern at the next level. He can lock onto his first read at times as well, and I think he struggles with disguised coverages, so trying to figure out what defense is in front of him at times, that's going to get even more complicated at the next level. So I think he's got to figure that out a little bit more this year as we see the college season go on. And I think that this is also a player that sometimes to a fault can hunt the big play. He looks for those splash plays downfield, forces throws instead of taking some of those layup easy check down routes. From a dynasty perspective, I think this is a player who does have fantasy quarterback one upside if the body and the decision making stuff holds up at the next level. But obviously the floor for a guy like this, especially a guy who has had injuries in the past, I think could flame out quickly. There's a lot of things that still need to be unpacked with Garrett Nussmeier. He isn't a can't miss prospect by any means, but I think he's going to be a boom bust pick that does have NFL traits, and I think can be a very successful quarterback at the next level if he lands in the right landing spot with the right scheme fit for him and his play style. Let's go to my second guy that I want to talk about, and it's going to be running back Jeremiyah Love from Notre Dame. This is an explosive playmaking running back, my favorite running back in this class by far. It's not even close if we're being honest. I think he has track speed, home run ability, a true dual threat running back that can take it to the house on any single touch. I think he has really strong contact balance as well for a speed running back, and he keeps his momentum after hits, being able to kind of absorb contact and keep it churning to get additional yardage. He's a natural pass catcher as well. He's dangerous after the catch, looking to make the big play, kind of turns into a receiver once he gets that football in his hands, and he's shifty in space, making multiple ways that he can make defenders miss. I just think he's a very, very talented running back overall. Now, he runs harder than his frame suggests. I think he finishes a lot of runs with authority, kind of punishing defenders for trying to tackle him early on. He's versatile, like I said, good in the receiving game, can play out wide, in the slot, has that 3-down skill set to be a difference maker, especially in PPR formats for us in fantasy. And he's had some rapid year-to-year improvement, and I think his ceiling is still even higher than we can even imagine right now. Now, that said, he's not a perfect prospect. He does have some pass pro issues that obviously can affect your playing time at the next level. I think he can get bullied by rushers when they're kind of pushing downfield, trying to make tackles on the quarterback. He does get bullied in those situations a little bit at times, and I think that's because of the light frame. 206 pounds, I think it kind of limits sometimes his ability. Even though he runs strong, it may limit the ability to be a bell cow at the next level if NFL teams don't believe that he can play well enough in those pass protection scenarios. Now, his route tree is raw. When he is split out wide, like I said, he does it. He He just doesn't have a ton in the bag yet. I think that's something he can improve on, but he also misses, I think, some of the vision reads when it comes to gap and power run schemes. So he's more of a guy that's going to be more of a zone run type of guy, probably going to fit better in those types of schemes at the next level. So that's something I'm going to be paying attention to once we get around NFL draft time. And I think one more thing that does pop up on tape a little bit more than I'd like it is some ball security concerns. I think when he gets creative, trying to hurdle, do things like that, sometimes the football pops out, and we obviously don't want to see that happen at the next level. That is a guaranteed way for NFL coaches to sit your ass on the bench. And so we really want to see those ball security concerns kind of diminish over the next little while as he gets to that next level. Now, from a dynasty lens, I think he's going to be very, very good for fantasy football teams. Like I said, he's a dynamite. He has explosive speed, the receiving upside. It screams a PPR weapon. But like I said, I don't think he's a lock for a workhorse role, but I do think he can thrive, very similar to guys like Devon Achane, Alvin Kamara, those PPR running backs that have bell cow type qualities, even if they're not given 110% of the workload. Now, just like every other running back, he's going to have these boom weeks. I think that's baked into the analysis for a guy like Jeremiyah Love, but the durability, the volume, those questions are going to cap his ceiling overall right away. But like I said, I think he is going to probably be coming into the NFL draft day as a top 12-ish dynasty running back. He's that good of a player. Now, remember, I said draft eligible prospects, and the next guy we're going to talk about, I do think is more likely 2027 than he is 2026, but I still want to talk about him regardless. It's Arch Manning, quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. This is a quarterback who is a mobile pocket passing type of guy. He can do a lot with his legs, but he does still sit in the pocket and make those tough throws. And that kind of takes me immediately right into what he does well. He's very poised when he's in the pocket. I think he keeps his eyes downfield under pressure. He's quick. He has a smooth release. He drives the ball with velocity. These are all traits that you want to see out of a franchise quarterback. I think he has advanced level anticipation. And I think he throws his wide receivers open very often, which is a very highly touted skill set that NFL coaches are going to be looking for. And not only that, but he is a legit athlete. I think he has dual threat ability, more than people even realize, with legit speed that is going to show itself on tape, even at the next level when he plays faster competition. This is a player who has strong pre-snap recognition. I think he adjusts the protections and the plays when he's commanding that offense very well. He has big moment poise, doesn't rattle after the mistakes that he makes, and has great touch on the deep balls and drops it in stride, even if he's on the run sometimes. And not only all of that, obviously, like all of those traits are stuff that you really want to see at the next level, but he's a natural leader. I think he really commands respect in the locker room, which is an off of the field trait that NFL coaches are going to want in their locker room as well. Now, it is not all 100% everything locked and loaded, ready, Arch Manning NFL level prospect. I do think that there are minor concerns, and we saw some of that happen in the first game here at Ohio State. He does have limited starts. There's still a very real lack of experience for Arch Manning at the collegiate level, which is something that we want to see, and that's why I think he is going to go back for another year, his senior season, come out in 2027, because he wants to get that collegiate experience before he jumps over to the NFL. Now, I do think at times, because of the talent that Arch has in his arm strength and some of the arm talent that he has overall, he trusts it a little too much at times, forcing balls into traffic, getting himself into trouble. The ball placement is inconsistent, I think, on the move. At times, when he gets out of the pocket, is rolling, he can get a little bit lackadaisical with some of the throws, and he does need to prove that he can stay sharp under heavy pressure, because there's going to be a lot of weight, a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations that are going to be sitting on this man's shoulders just because of the last name on the jersey. He needs to work a little bit more on full field reads as well. I think still developing at that game speed, but like I said, a lot of this is just due to lack of experience, so this can all be fixed up and tuned up over time. The more starts that he gets under his belt, this is still a player that I think has a ton of physically gifted tools. Obviously, along with those tools, it's the pedigree. All of this equals franchise quarterback upside. We've seen it, we've talked about it. This is no surprise if you've been around the Dynasty or the Devy community for a while. We've known that Arch Manning is coming, and a lot of people have been very excited about him. And because of that, I think if he gets drafted, as highly as we think he can, which could be number one overall, he could be very fantasy football relevant right away, especially if he lands in a quarterback-friendly system. Again, I am going to emphasize this one more time. I think a lot of this risk from him still comes from that small sample size, the lack of experience, but this can get ironed out over the next couple of years. And I think people who are panicking off of the first Ohio State game, first thing that you saw in his start here in his junior season, a lot of people are going to overreact to that. Pump the brakes. I think the kid is still going to be very, very talented at the next level. Let's talk about a wide receiver prospect, Jordyn. Jordyn Tyson out of Arizona State. I think he's the #1 wide receiver in this 2026 draft class. I think he's an elite separator, and I think he can be an elite separator at the next level as well. He has fluid hips, he's very explosive throughout his breaks, he wins on those intermediate routes, manipulates defenders with different pace and angles when he's running his routes. Overall, just a very talented route runner in general. He tracks the deep ball very naturally. I think he adjusts to these footballs in stride, which is something you want to see, especially because every little moment or change of pace is going to matter at the next level. So being able to adjust to that in stride without losing speed, that's very important. He has very strong hands, I think, in traffic. When people throw him the football, even if he's draped by a defender, he's making these contested grabs. He's physical after the catch. He has a lot of balance in his game, especially when he's in the air. And I think he's very elusive, and that stands out to me on tape. Now, something NFL coaches are going to care about that we're not going to care about for fantasy football, but it is good because it means he's going to stay on the football field, is he is a committed blocker in the run game. I think that means he's going to have a high snap count, like I said, staying on the football field. And he has a little bit of a basketball background, so you have some of that footwork that shows up on the boundary outside with the body control, boxing defenders out, trying to make these grabs. It all shows up. This is also a player that I think is clutch. He delivers on third downs, fourth quarters, big plays. If you look Jordyn Tyson's way, most likely he's coming down with the football, and that is a massive trait that NFL GMs are going to love. Now, there are some concerns, I think, with injury history for him. He's had knee injuries, collarbone injuries, things like that are raising some of the durability concerns for me as he goes into his junior season here. And I think a lot of that is because he has a lean, skinny frame, and I think he could use a little bit more bulk up there, add some weight, add some muscle, and be a little bit more durable that way. The route precision at the top of his breaks does need a little bit of sharpening. He's not a perfect route runner, a very good route runner, not a perfect one, and he does have tunnel vision after the catch, doesn't always use his blockers, just gets upfield, gets a little hectic, gets a little crazy, and I don't think always he's using the blockers to maximize the after the catch ability for him. Now, like I said, he's skinny, so also that means he does struggle a little bit when he does see these physical press corners that are up at the line of scrimmage, giving him a little bit of hands on the body. It does show up, but I think if he has a healthy season and when he's healthy, he does have wide receiver one upside with an immediate fantasy football impact, and he has a lot of versatility in his game. I think he can play outside, I think he can play in the slot, and the versatility to where he can play is going to boost his long-term potential for fantasy football. But like I said, obviously the medicals are a red flag. Other than that, there's some things to work on, but I do think this is a very talented wide receiver prospect, and like I said, my #1 wide receiver here in the 2026 class. Let's move on and talk about quarterback LaNorris Sellers. He's another quarterback that I really like, coming from South Carolina. He's more of a dual threat guy, has a huge arm, effortless velocity on those tight throws, just feels like he has a cannon of an arm at times, and he's a very physical runner. You know, at 240 pounds, he breaks tackles with the power and the speed that he possesses. It's the athleticism that stands out. But not only that, he's poised in the pocket. I think he resets and throws on the move very well, and he's dangerous when these plays get out of structure and he has to create these explosive plays downfield or with his legs, which makes him also a guy that really shows up as a clutch competitor, because when things get hectic in those big games, he seems to always deliver. I think he has a really high football IQ. He reads defenses pre and post snap really well. He plays clean. The repeatable mechanics, the accurate passing, all of this just stands out on tape as things you can tell that he's been working on over the majority of his career. And an added bonus for him is he's really young for this class, so I think he has a lot of development that he can still run away with as he gets a little bit older, more mature, and ages a little bit more, just like I said, because he's a little bit younger than everybody else. Now, I would like to see a little bit more touch from time to time on those deep balls. That's still a little bit inconsistent, and I do think the athleticism does force him to play a little bit too fast at times when he's under pressure. He rushes those throws. He tries to get out a little bit early. I think those things show up, but it's because he's so athletic outside of structure. Now, he does only have 1 full year of starting, so just like Arch Manning, he does have some limited experience, more experience than Arch, but still limited nonetheless. And I think just like Arch Manning as well, he overtrusts his arm. He forces the football into tight coverage at times, and it gets him a little bit in trouble. So I'd like to see those things cleaned up, as well as the anticipation on some of those timing routes. We need to see some improvement there. But this is a player who has a very, very high fantasy football ceiling because of the rushing upside, and I think he has the franchise quarterback tools that NFL GMs want to see to potentially give him the keys to the franchise. Now, like I said, he's a little bit inexperienced, so some of the decision making is raw. It's going to need a little bit cleaned up, but overall, I think this is a player who is the classic high risk, high reward type of prospect that can pay off big time in Dynasty fantasy football leagues. Let's go on and talk about another running back. I want to talk about Nick Singleton from Penn State. I think this is a player who plays with a ton of explosiveness. The burst that he has through the line of scrimmage, instantly getting vertical, makes him such a dynamic weapon and such a threat in the run game. And he has elite long speed. It erases really pretty much any potential pursuit angle that anybody is going to try and get on him in that linebacker room, in that safety room. He is a true weapon once the football is in his hands because of that speed. And I think he's improved a lot as a patient runner over the course of the last couple of seasons. He waits for his blocks to develop, which is definitely something we like to see because that's what makes those home run plays happen more often than not. He has very strong contact balance. He runs through arm tackles. He's hard to get down. He's a reliable receiver in the receiving game as well, with very soft hands against those linebackers. And I think he's a very willing blocker who has shown advanced traits in that pass protection game, which is going to keep him on the football field as a 3-down back. And not only that, he has special teams value as well. I don't know how much they're going to use him on special teams at the next level, but he has shown that he can be valuable as a kick returner. So that's just more ways for him to get onto the football field. Now he can get some occasional tunnel vision. I think missing some of those cutback lanes because he's seeking that big play with his legs because of the athleticism. And I do think there's time where he has some hip tightness that does limit the agility and some of that multi-cut creativity that we want to see out of some of these running backs. So the jump cuts, they don't cover too much ground overall when he is making those side-to-side jumps. You'll notice too on a lot of these plays, a lot on tape, this guy doesn't have a ton of wiggle to this game, and I don't think it's because he doesn't have it. I think more so it's because he's relying on that speed and that power, and he's just trying to beat people as a touch-and-go runner. So I'd like to see him get a little bit more wiggle to his game there as well. And the stiff arm, it is inconsistent. It's underused for the size and the strength that I think he possesses, and it could be an added weapon to his game that he hasn't really utilized to the best of his ability so far. Now, as far as your Dynasty fantasy football teams go, this is going to be a guy who's going to be a day one role player. I think he has big play upside. Not necessarily going to be an elite running back prospect like we've seen over the last couple of years, like Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not one of those guys, but he is damn good. And he truly does have 3-down potential, which is going to boost that long-term fantasy football ceiling for him because we want to have these football players on the football field. Obviously, that's how the easiest way you can translate to fantasy football points. Now, I will say, if he does add some of that nuance to his game, add some creativity to his run game, I do think this is a player that could be a fantasy football star. So he's definitely somebody that I'm keeping my eye on going into the 2026 draft class. Let's move on and talk about wide receiver Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. This is a very, very polished route runner, and I really like what I see on tape from him. He's kind of just a technician. He sinks his hips, he sells vertical routes, he separates at the stem. He does all of these things that you love to see from those pure route runners, and he has great body control, adjusts to off-target throws really well, has strong hands, plucks him away from his frame, very reliable in traffic, and he reminds me a lot of a former Ohio State wide receiver in Chris Olave. And I think a lot of that is because he plays with this veteran level, the savviness, the tempo that he plays with, the awareness that he has in routes. It's very, very good, and he finds these soft spots in the defense. I think he's an excellent deep ball tracker as well. He positions himself very perfectly on those deep throws. So just a savvy, a smart, a veteran type of receiver, and you really shouldn't expect too much less, especially considering how Ohio State has continued to put out these really good NFL type of caliber receivers. But overall, I think this is a player that I really am growing on and rising on, and I want to see more from him so far this year. The yak is very efficient. He makes the first guy miss a lot when he's getting north to south. He's very physical and competitive, especially when he's playing over the middle. So lots of things to like with Carnell Tate. He is a player though that I think lacks that elite long speed. He's not going to scare defenses vertically, but he's going to beat you with some savviness. I think he needs a little bit more functional strength to his game as well. He can be redirected and pushed off the line when he's in press coverage, and the blocking effort is there, but the technique is inconsistent. So he's not really that good in the run game as a blocker. I also think this is a player that can drift on some routes when he's not the first read, which is a little bit problematic. It just telegraphs to the defenses that you're not going to be the guy, which obviously isn't good from a film standpoint if your coach is wanting you to sell some routes. I also think he may be close to his ceiling already just because he lacks that elite athleticism. I don't know if there's much more to his game than what we've already seen. Now that said, from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, he's probably a high floor prospect. He's going to be a player that's going to be an immediate PPR and possession value type of wide receiver, but he could be more of an NFL team wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3 than he is a league winning type of guy for your fantasy football teams. And unlike some of the other players in this class, I do think he's going to be a little bit more scheme dependent. We want to see him in those timing based offenses where he's really going to thrive in those situations as a possession receiver, a savvy route runner, but there are going to be some NFL schemes that he doesn't fit in very well. So he's a player that I would definitely want to see a little bit more out of. But like I said, I do think we've seen pretty much everything he has to offer in his game so far. Let's move on and talk about wide receiver receiver Antonio Williams out of Clemson. This is also another really polished route runner in this class. He has elite body control. I think he plays bigger than he's even listed as his size. He doesn't show up as a big wide receiver in the box score, but he plays bigger than that. He's crisp. He has very nuanced routes with tempo changes and sudden breaks. He's a natural hands catcher, and I think he does a really good job of extending and plucking the football cleanly out of the air, even over bigger corners. This is a player who's shifty after the catch. He slips tackles with his compact style, and I think he makes the most of those after the catch opportunities, and he has a very advanced release package, beating press coverage despite the size that he has on film. This is a player who's smart versus coverage. He adjusts his routes very well, which makes him very quarterback friendly, which is going to be something that people like, especially if you have a little bit of an inexperienced quarterback at the next level. And he can play slot and outside, probably more likely a slot guy than an outside guy at the next level, but he can play both positions, so he's a little bit versatile and can be moved around the football field. And again, just like Nick Singleton, as an added value, this is also a player that has some punt return value, so it does add some roster flexibility for him at the next level to make some impact plays at some other positions. So overall, I like the player. I think he's a little bit undersized though. At 5'11", 190, even though he plays a little bit bigger, we'd like to see that be a little bit more NFL sized. And I do think it does limit him in the red zone specifically and on those contested catches. This is also another player that I think lacks that true top end speed, and because of that, he's not going to go get a ton of deep balls. He's not going to beat the corner. He's not going to burn you guys off of the line of scrimmage. Overall, I think the injury history as well does raise minor durability concerns for a guy like Antonio Williams. The blocking technique is raw. He lacks the strength, he lacks the leverage, and I think a lot of that is because he's undersized, like I said, and some of the drops that he's had, some of the inconsistencies in the yak production, it does need to be cleaned up at the next level. So definitely not a perfect prospect, but there are plenty of traits to like from Antonio Williams. This is a player that I do expect to go into the NFL right away and be a NFL-ready slot wide receiver with a very high floor because of that. Probably going to end up a very reliable PPR type of option, wide receiver 2 upside in the right system. Think a little bit of Josh Downs-ish at the next level. So a very safe prospect, but overall I think his ceiling is capped because of the size and some of the athleticism concerns with Antonio Williams. Moving on to my second to last guy, let's go back to the quarterback position. Drew Allar is somebody that I really like in this class, quarterback out of Penn State. Another mobile pocket passer. I think he has the prototypical NFL frame. He's very tough to bring down. He has elite arm strength, drives the ball at all levels of this football field, and he's very calm under pressure, keeping his eyes downfield pretty much at every single moment that he has the football in his hands. Now, because of his size, he also has strong ball security. He rarely turns that football over either. And not only does he have this crazy arm strength, but he also has a lot of touch, especially when he's in the red zone, and I think the timing that he plays with stands out on tape. I think Allar does a really good job extending plays, especially when he's under pressure, keeping his options alive, making those extra reads, those extra throws downfield that keeps the offense moving. And I think he does a really good job reading defenses pre-snap and working through his progressions. But overall, I think this is just a really competitive quarterback, and he plays on a really good team here at Penn State. So I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with the physical traits of Drew Allar. Even if he needs a little bit of cleaning up of some of these other things, he just has those physical traits that you can't teach for a quarterback. Now, I did say there are some things that need cleaning up. The mechanics, they do seem to slip a little bit under duress, and so his accuracy will waver at times, especially when he's on the run. And I do think that some of the timing that he plays with, especially on some other throws, is still a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes his base, the throwing base that he plays with, gets a little bit narrow at times, and that does hurt his ability for ball placement opportunities. And I do think he can predetermine some of his reads, especially when he's playing against zone coverage. Now, like I said, he is athletic, so when he does extend those plays, sometimes he extends them a little bit too long, which does invite additional added pressure to him from the edge because he's just holding the ball a little bit too long. Now, from a dynasty perspective, this is a player that I think the traits, the physical gifts, they just scream franchise quarterback and they scream fantasy football upside. So I'm not going to blame anybody for getting high on Drew Allar in the NFL draft process. The arm strength, the size, it just gives him this immediate ceiling that people are going to look at, and it's going to be hard to pass upon. Now, that said, it is a player that I do think needs polished. I do think he has long-term cornerstone type of potential for you in a dynasty lens, but like I said, it's going to be fixed up a little bit. That can be easily fixed up at the next level. You just got to get the right coaching staff and the right guys in the building around you to help you build that. But the arm talent, the size, all of that stuff, it's undeniable. Drew Allar is very, very impressive as a prospect. And let's go to my last guy. I want to talk about wide receiver Makai Lemon. He's a player that I've really liked on tape coming from USC. He's a quick separator. This is a player who plays with a ton of explosive acceleration. He eats up cushion off the line, just really eliminating any cushion that corner has made early on. He's a route technician. He manipulates the leverage, creates windows for his quarterback. He's smart versus zone, finds those soft spots spots consistently, and he has really strong hands plucking away that football from the frame through contact. It's also a player that has very elite change of direction. I think he turns these short gains into very big explosive plays in a blink of a second, and the body control that he has on these routes when he's up in the air trying to catch the football, it just allows him to create these tough catches outside of his frame. He has an advanced feel for spacing and leverage at a very young age, which is rare to see from prospects sometimes, and I think he adds value as a return man on special teams as well. But when I'm watching Makai Lemon, he's a player that kind of reminds me of some of these other USC wide receivers that we've seen, like Jordan Addison and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, he does need work in a few places. I think he struggles versus press coverage from bigger corners, and I think a little bit of that is because of the size that he has. He does have a limited route tree when he's playing outside, so this is also a player that I'm going to be viewing as mainly as a slot wide receiver at the next level. And not only that, but the run blocking effort, the technique, it's inconsistent. Again, I think we can attribute this to some of the lack of size from Lemon, and overall, those size concerns, they do show up over the middle, especially against some of the guys that are more NFL size and have that NFL physicality. Now, that said, some of the separation windows, they do shrink without those free releases, but like I said, this is also another player that I think is a very savvy route runner and can do a lot out of the slot. This is going to be a player who's going to be a day one contributor in the slot with some upside to grow at the next level. I think he has a very PPR friendly skill set. He's going to be a steady floor play right away. The ceiling is still a little bit untapped, so there is some stuff to like there, but I think a lot of that is going to happen if he gets some of that physical development into his game. We need to see him get a little bit more weight, get a little bit stronger, some of these things that you see happen at the next level, and a lot of that is also going to be dependent on scheme fit at the next level as well. So there you have it, folks. Those are 10 prospects in the 2026 class that are draft eligible for those Dynasty rookie drafts here in the upcoming year that I've been keeping my eye on, that I've watched on tape, that I've seen some things that I like. I think all of these players have first round rookie pick consideration, especially in those super flex leagues, obviously because we're talking a lot about some of the quarterbacks here in today's video. Like I said at the beginning, I don't know how this is going to be received. I don't know how this is going to go. I hope you guys do like it. I enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed watching the tape. I enjoyed talking about these prospects. And if you enjoyed it as well, please do me the favor, hit the like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. Got content like this coming out year round. I'm going to do an update to these prospects every single month, so you guys are going to see the 2026 class evolve and grow and people rise and fall up my rankings over time. Hopefully you guys are going to stick around to see that. And also make sure you go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. But with all of that out of the way, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I'll see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.